When you have those kinds of crimes being committed, almost surely the next layer down is going to be even worse. So if they're trafficking in stolen materials of one kind, what else are they trafficking in? If you get my drift.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Before we begin this interview with our good friend Wayne Jett, just a quick note of thanks to this interview's sponsor, ratefamily.com. Now guys, this is a little grim, but we're all pragmatists, and death in the family can be hard. But unfortunately, we all have to deal with it sooner or later. All of us leave behind final expenses, such as funeral costs, medical bills, and other debts. In fact, the average funeral costs between $8,000 and $9,000, and having no insurance when you pass on can leave your loved ones with a huge bill. So take control and have the satisfaction that they will be financially taken care of. Visit ratefamily.com to get a free quote. You can select the best plan to fit your needs and budget. You can even choose how and how often to make payments. Some members pay as low as $36 per month due to income level. So visit ratefamily.com or call 1-855-919-RATE. Don't let your family pay for your final expenses. I'll leave the link below this video. All right, friends, without further ado, Wayne Jett joins us from Classical Capital. You know his book. Many of you bought it, The Fruits of Graft. Wayne Jett, how are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, Sean. Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you back. Thanks for coming on. Hey, guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about policing global graft in the Democrats' new witch hunt, the impeachment inquiry. Wayne, there's a new piece out today from the Epoch Times on YouTube, The Truth About Impeachment, 9 Key Facts. I would suggest people go and check that out because, once again, Wayne, the Democrats are obfuscating truth and targeting this president for destruction, meanwhile omitting all facts that would point the finger at Joe Biden for the actual criminality and the actual quid pro quo against Ukraine, where he got the prosecutor fired by threatening to withhold $1 billion in military aid. It's shocking the depths to which these Democrats will go to obfuscate truth.
Well, no question about it, and the fight is still on. You can ask the big question about exactly why are they so absolutely insistent upon pushing the removal from office of the elected president of the United States. They're doing so because they have so much to lose. They have tremendous crimes. The ones that have been indicated superficially are very minor compared to what is really there. I think you're well aware of that, and so would your audience be. And they're worrying about those crimes that they are deeply involved in. And not only that, but they're worrying about the operations of their masters, the global cabal, as I usually call it, or the kingmakers cabal, the one that is looking for globalist rule without national boundaries, without national governments. That's certainly what they were after, and they thought they had essentially reached their goal in 2016 when they had the opposition surely going to be elected to the presidency. That's what why they are fighting so desperately and doing anything necessary to control the dialogue that they conduct with people through the mass media, all of which they control. Thank goodness that we have channels such as yours and others on the web in order to get information to people. And thank goodness we still have many patriots who are doing their best to achieve exactly that. But their crimes are serious. I mean, for example, look at the situation in regard to Ukraine. And is getting so much attention right now. And this conversation between the president of the United States and the president of Ukraine. Apparently, as I recall, it was even initiated by the president of Ukraine. But in any event, the transcript comes out. It appears essentially innocent. And yet we have our star witness now who is on the White House National Security Council, an immigrant from Ukraine himself, with some very dubious ties, but nevertheless giving testimony that he attempted to modify the transcript, and others in the White House would not allow it to be. And yet he's the one that is being touted as believable and credible, and the one that we should trust, as opposed to the one elected by more than 60 million Americans. It's a crime that goes into matters relating to Joe Biden, the former vice president, and his relations, his insistence that we've all seen on video, that a prosecutor there must be fired. This was back during the Obama administration, when Joe Biden had been given the so-called point person authority to deal with Ukraine. I think primarily for purposes of engaging in graft. And in those circumstances, had the prosecutor fired so he could not proceed any further in inquiring into the operations of that so-called energy company. Now we have information that that so-called energy company might not have been dealing just in energy at all, at least not in energy produced by Ukraine. There are reports that it may well have been getting its energy from stolen oil in the Middle East or other illicit merchandise, either stolen oil or stolen natural gas or something of the sort, or even stolen energy from the Ukraine itself. So when you have those kinds of crimes being committed, almost surely the next layer down is going to be even worse. So if they're trafficking in stolen materials of one kind, what else are they trafficking in? If you get my drift. And so their willingness to pay great sums to the family, the vice president, especially when he's given authority over whether they do or do not get U.S. Loan guarantees in amounts of $1 billion or more. Obviously, that's a lot of power. And what I had written about on this subject is that while we are told our government is so lily white in regard to the quality of our leadership, their honesty, their integrity, the light shining for the rest of the world as to good government, it appears to be the case that our government and our top officials have been engaging in tremendous graft for many years. Both parties, most likely, but certainly what we've been seeing from the Obama administration is extremely widespread. And when you have that kind of circumstance, the point I was trying to make is that there's almost no chance that a corrupt politician in the higher reaches of our government is ever going to be brought to justice. We saw what happened when Hillary Clinton got caught in so many, we'll say, infractions of the law in regard to her service as Secretary of State, and yet nothing was done whatsoever regarding the classified information that was made available on her private computer so that it could be taken by foreign governments, I would assume, in return for favors or pay on their parts. When those parties are being allowed to do that by their own government, certainly if their own party is then reelected to the presidency, they're not going to be prosecuted. Their only possibility is if another party's president is elected, and even then, that president has to be one who is not an operative of the same establishment that Democratic presidents have been. So you have almost a 100% assurance that your graft will not be caught, will not be publicized, will not be punished. That is our record, and that is what they're trying to make stick on behalf of the Obama administration, including Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and of course, Vice President Joe Biden. But in order to put sort of a cap on that, my understanding is that the news is not all bad just coming from this secret House hearings. The indications or reports I hear, and I expect you have too, is that not only the prosecutor has already convened grand jury, one or more, I think more than one, to hear evidence regarding various crimes that are from very prominent individuals, but also that the Attorney General Barr himself is working on an investigative report that we can expect to have out in the near future. So that's, in summary, the way I see things at this point. But it is a dire circumstance. They're trying to make this go through and get enough support from operatives in the House and the Senate, operatives of the global elite, to vote out the president, remove him from office for pretended crimes that just aren't there, but simply on a political basis saying we're taking him out of office, he's gone, and there will be no opposition to the global cabal that has ruled the world, unfortunately, for so many years.
Yeah. Well, James Clapper knows he's even under investigation now. And so when you refer to the prosecutor, the federal prosecutor, it's John Durham. And we can hope that some of the real crimes of these deep state actors will be prosecuted. We have a tweet out on Wednesday, Wayne, from President Donald J. Trump on Twitter. Yesterday's Never Trumper witness could find no quid pro quo in the transcript of the phone call. There were many people listening to that call. How come they, including the president of Ukraine, found nothing wrong with it? Witch hunt, and that's exactly what it is. I want to make one other note here. President Trump, guys, has 66.4 million followers on Twitter, and I think it speaks to the nefarious activities over on Twitter that this president typically only gets 50 or 60,000 likes and 15 or 20,000 retweets. I mean, give me a break. 66 million. He's the most followed account on Twitter by far, I'm sure, and they don't want his message getting out. Another thing, Wayne, you made reference to trafficking. You said, if you get my gist, what else are they trafficking in? Referring to the Democrats. Well, we have Fast and Furious, so we had gun running, drug running. We have the Haiti situation with Laura Silsby being caught at the border trying to traffic out 33 children, and who came to her aid, Bill and Hillary Clinton. We have the Podesta Breitbart tweet, Breitbart saying in 2011 via Twitter, it's amazing to him that John Podesta isn't known as a world-class underage sex slave op, cover-upper, defending unspeakable dregs. And then, of course, we have the new Finders D-class, the CIA involved in child trafficking. It's just disgusting, and it seems to me, Wayne, that these Democrats want to do nothing other than cover up these hardcore crimes. Meanwhile, Hillary rockets into third place on Predict It as rumors swirl over 2020 run. This is the best they have to offer the American people. Get this, Wayne. Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden in second, and Hillary Clinton in third. They're going to run her again. She's going to throw her hat in the ring, and this criminal should be in Guantanamo, not in the Oval Office, Wayne.
Well, there we are. I think that pretty well summarizes it. It is a matter that is so far afield from what we have held up as the principles of equal justice under law in the United States, under our Constitution. We have seen openly top officials, even those on the Supreme Court, thumb their nose at the Constitution as if this is an outdated document that we really are embarrassed to have to defend. That is the kind of thing that has led to this kind of show hearing, show trial. It calls to mind the Great Terror of the 1930s under Stalin in the Soviet Union, when they had the show trials that basically brought to trial in closed sessions, sentencing to death anyone they accused of having contacts with Western countries. This is the kind of thing that they would like to pull off here if they can just get control. And when they can do it and maintain a straight face and even get full support from the major media in this country, to the President of the United States, this is a dangerous time. But again, as I have been in the past, I'm optimistic about our position. I remain so. And I remain optimistic that the president is going to be successful. This attempt to derail the election process for even next year, as well as they have impeded it so much from the 3 years ago, they are going to be defeated. I think we have in place in our president a very capable person and capable people behind him that are going to make their efforts to bring to justice these criminals that have gone so far to take our constitutional rights from us, are punished in the right way, and we get back to the point of having a constitutional government that the people can rely on as actually representing their interests.
Yeah. Well, let's go big picture here. Of course, your book, The Fruits of Graft, talks about these central bankers, and they're the ones that have been looting us for centuries, right? They're the ones that control the show. I mean, maybe the puppet masters at the very top of the pyramid are these international banksters and their intelligence agencies. That's the argument I've been making for a very long time. Let's talk a little bit about what happens to a republic that is looted by banksters. And that brings our attention to the Fed's repo market. The Fed's repos signal end of fiat Federal Reserve notes. Your article, Wayne, from October 15th. For weeks, financial observers have been agitated by astonishingly high sums of Fed Reserve notes, hundreds of billions of dollars, moving from the Fed to borrowers under lending instruments known as repurchase agreements or repos. On September 17th, the Fed created and loaned $53 billion to unnamed parties. Boy, that's a key right there, isn't it, Wayne? We don't know who gets the money. Unnamed parties. On September 18th, an additional $75 billion. Those 2 days are the tip of the iceberg. Who are the borrowers, and why is the Fed providing them so much money? To put it in perspective, these increases in monetary base, recall the angst of 2008 when the Fed's increases in monetary base during 2002 to 2006 were wrongly blamed for expansion of home mortgage lending during that time, during that decade, and for the ensuing 2008 financial terrorism. The largest increase in monetary base during an entire year between 2002 and 2006 was $45 billion. Now the Fed is eclipsing that amount in a single night. Who is getting the money, you ask, Wayne? And it's a very important question. I suppose the Fed is just giving it to its bankster buddies like Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, but we don't know, do we?
Well, we don't know. I suspect, and it's been reported in some places, that it's been to their various primary dealers who deal in Treasury securities on behalf of the Fed. But there was on, I think, October 11th, I point out in that article that there was a clarifying statement made, of course unusual in that respect for the Fed to say anything, but it indicated a couple of points that as to its activities, and it said essentially that it was doing both overnight and term repurchase agreements. In other words, a repurchase agreement, they loan out the money overnight under a particular instrument, and then supposedly if it's overnight, the next morning, the financial institution that got the loan pays it back. So it just provides liquidity overnight. But also they said they were doing term repurchase agreements, so we don't know how long the term might be or to whom it might be if it's more than overnight. A term could be 5 years, or term could be 5 days or 3 days or something of the sort. But one of the notes that was made in that October 11th clarification or information about what they were doing is that they were undertaking to remove possible or eliminate possible pressures in the money markets, money market funds in order to make sure that, as I read what they said, it was money market pressures might be pressing upward on interest rates, and therefore it would impede their ability to get the prime lending rate for overnight loans from the bank reserves. Their policy to get that low interest rate could be impeded by the money market pressures, and so therefore they were putting these repos out for that purpose. Now, after giving further reflection on that, it seems to me that that sounds an awful lot like the kind of terms that, for example, the White House's representatives in dealing with the Fed behind the scenes would have asked them to do in order to make sure that they keep interest rates low and achieve their target. So I've become more inclined to think that these particular actions are things that the White House itself has arranged with the Fed and therefore approves of them. In that kind of circumstance, I've also looked at one of the measures that I look at primarily in regard to Fed's operations is what is the monetary base total. That's basically the total amount of money that they have created and put into the economy. And how has it varied in recent years and in recent months, and particularly in relation to these repo agreements? Well, in looking at that, there is a comparison. The best comparison I can do, they've just come out with the numbers for the end of October as compared to the end of September a year ago. Those are the two numbers I compared, and what I find is that the total monetary base is $357 billion less at the end of October of this year than it was at the end of September of 2018. So even with this repo activity that seemed to be so large and so voluminous and creating more money, it seems to me that we are in less precipitous conditions now than we were a year ago in terms of the amount of money that the number of Fed notes that the Fed had created.
Well, now wait a minute though. Do you suppose, if that's truly the case, if that's actually factual information, because they can paint any picture they want, we don't know the real numbers, but are you suggesting that they're doing what they did in the Great Depression? They're going to cause a recession by restricting capital? I think that's probably what's going on. And then I want to ask you about the TARP bailouts, but first, your thoughts on that. How in the world can they be printing money hand over fist, giving it to the banks in repo, and yet the monetary base is shrinking?
Of course, you're right. They can manipulate anything, but I tend to think that they have been more extreme in creating the monetary base and increasing it. You remember, as of 2008, the monetary base was 845 billion. Now that was under 1 trillion, and today we're.
Did you just say 2008? Is that what you said? Okay.
That was back at the time of the so-called
TARP bailout.
mortgage crisis.
Yeah, this is the point I want to make. This is the point I want to make. I want people to, this is very important. I want people listening to understand how far down the rabbit hole we've gone in terms of the Fed destroying this economy with the printing presses and bailing out banks. In 2008, the Troubled Asset Relief Program was, they say, a $700 billion bailout. Guys, at the time, Congress raised the debt ceiling to $11.3 trillion. That wasn't that long ago. It was 2008, folks. Here we sit in 2019 with $20 trillion in debt, or maybe it's $21 trillion at this point, Wayne. And the Fed is bailing out banks to the tune of $45 billion a night. I mean, do the math, folks. You're not going to get any relief if you've got troubled assets. The Fed's not coming to your rescue if you can't pay your mortgage. And I just think it speaks to the criminality of what this system is built upon with these privately owned central banks, Wayne, because they can do whatever they want in the name of saving the economy. Literally, they can do or say anything they want, and they're answerable to no one. We have that famous soundbite from Alan Greenspan. They are answerable literally to no one.
Well, that is the case, and they insist upon that being the case. Anyone who denies that or contests whether that should be the case is regarded as a nutcase and so forth. And there are still people at this time, I think some in good faith, arguing that the gold standard is not to be trusted because it caused the Great Depression. I think in large part, at least the primary persons making that last argument seem to be in good faith, but I think they misunderstand. For example, I just saw a piece last night that makes that assertion and talks about how the gold standard is always deflationary, and points to the Great Depression as being the case. Well, I can guarantee you they haven't read my book, The Fruits of Graft, which shows exactly how that deflation was created, and it wasn't because of the gold standard. It was because of violation of the gold standard, and specifically, most of it was caused by Franklin Roosevelt taking money out of the U.S. economy and buying gold with it, and sequestering that gold, demonetizing it so that the gold could not be created based on that gold, even though that was in violation of the gold standard practices and requirements that every country participating in the gold standard was to monetize all of the gold within its possession. FDR did exactly the opposite of that. He bought more than double the entire amount of gold that we had acquired in our entire history as of 1930. In his first 8 years in office, he bought more than twice that much gold, 13,185 metric tons, and he demonetized all of it. And of course, he bought it with money out of the U.S. economy, taxes and borrowing. And in that circumstances, no wonder there was no money in the U.S. economy. Nobody had any, and everybody was paying 3 cents on the dollar for bread or anything else that they were able to buy.
Well, Wayne, let's fast forward to the present here again as we wrap up this conversation. We're a little tight on time today, guys. That's my fault. Apologies. But how do we extricate ourselves from this situation? Even if all goes well and the Democrats are crushed and their impeachment witch hunt just fades away as it should, and President Trump is elected for another term, and even if we can, to a large degree, recapture the spirit of the republic with honest politicians as the dishonest ones are rounded up and thrown in Guantanamo, best case scenario, how do we extricate ourselves from this position where a central bank still sits atop our economy and can print at will and is answerable to no one? And might I add, by the way, a Rothschild-controlled, to a large degree, central bank?
Well, the way I've phrased it a number of times in the past is that we must uproot the global cabal, the kingmakers cabal, including the Rothschilds and their allies, the Rockefellers, and many other power centers around the world. I believe that's the case, the situation that is being undertaken, has been undertaken, and I believe is well underway. We've talked about the executive order signed back in 2017, became effective December 21st of 2017, that freezes the assets of all those involved in human trafficking and related crimes. I believe that certainly encompasses the global elite that controls our central banks. And that process, I'm convinced, is underway. We have to overcome what is now being presented as another effort by the establishment, by the global elite, to take out of office the champion that the people of the United States put into the presidency, because he has the backing and the protection necessary to survive an attack against that global cabal. That's where we have our money. That's where we are in terms of our reliance upon the strength of that effort. If it falls, it will be an event much more consequential to the world than the show trials of the 1938 and thereabouts. Those that I've described in my book as well. The testimony from one of the individuals who was an elitist operative. I've told those stories with you before, but just in wrapping up, if I might just say to you that I have a tremendous honor, I believe, that has been given my book, The Fruits of Graft. It's been named number 6 on the all-time list for Robert David Steele, awarded 7 stars as a life-changing, transformative book. I never aspired to that kind of accolade in writing, beginning the writing of my book. I never imagined I could get it because I just knew I had to write a book because of the information I'd found was so important, so significant in changing the lies, disproving the lies that we've been told our entire lives as Americans. As to what caused that, it was in fact a government-imposed genocide against Americans as well as the rest of the world, and it was imposed primarily by their chief operative, Franklin Roosevelt. Although Hoover cooperated in it, got it started, it was Roosevelt who did most of what was done to starve to death at least 3 to 6 million Americans, starve them to death, not just make them hungry. And of course, to weaken the middle class severely, and has weakened it to this day. In part, what they achieved was springing the dollar loose from the gold standard so they could rob us that way, take the value of whatever Americans work for, and leave us finally to the point that we are now, in which our currency, the so-called Federal Reserve note, is in all likelihood going to go to zero unless the president can get off soon enough and get to a firm currency, which I believe is in the process of planning for. That's what's in the wings, and I'm still very hopeful that's going to be achieved.
Oh, I hope so too. Well, that's encouraging. It's good to end this conversation with the cup half full. I like your perspective, of course, Wayne, and we've got to take the good news with the bad news. And the bad news is these people have controlled our system for about as long as any of us can remember, and for decades even before that. And if you guys want to support Wayne, you can buy the book in hardcover for $25 at classicalcapital.com. That's Wayne's website. And he also posts original articles there quite frequently, so do check it out. That's the website, right, Wayne? Best place to buy the book?
That is correct, at classicalcapital.com, and postage shipping is free for those in the United States. So just pick your tab carefully if you're in a foreign country, because I have to have some help on the postage when it's shipping there. But nevertheless, very happy to have your interest, Sean, and very good to be on with your audience again. They've been very kind to me in the past.
Yes, they have. They've been kind to every author I've ever had on, but that's because y'all are truth tellers and y'all write great books. And so I do appreciate that. If you guys want to support Patriot Wayne Jett, check out his website, classicalcapital.com, and the book, The Fruits of Graft. Wayne, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Sean, for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. A special thank you to my patrons who are keeping us in the fight for truth and real news, despite YouTube and Google changing their algorithms. By the way, guys, use Bing. I've been using Bing lately, and I'm no fan of Microsoft. I think that's a Microsoft-related search engine. But it works a whole lot better in finding truth and old articles that you're searching for than Google. They've literally destroyed Google to try to bury truth. So use different search engines. And of course, guys, for real news, check out sgtreport.com 24/7, the antidote to corporate propaganda and Mockingbird mainstream media lies. Thanks for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.
So we have a dereliction of duty all through the chain of command from the White House on down. From what you found out today, they were lying intentionally to deceive the American people, the families in the armed forces, and they've got to be held accountable.